Yo, 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 this is Infinite Flash coming here at you. Today I'm going to be talking about the second game from round 3 with Aronian playing Maxime Vachier Lagrave. What a long name. I'm just going to call him MBL from now on. No more Maxime Vachier Lagrave. Oh, what an annoying name that is. Maxime Vachier Lagrave. Well, anyways, enough of that. Enough of me being kind of awkward there. Wow, let's just start off with the game. We have a MVL playing white and Aronian playing black, and without further ado, MVL starts with knight f3. I support this move. D5, and in the ready that I recommended in my opening series, I suggested c4, but in this game, white plays g3, and this is an entire different setup. And in this position, one thing I like about playing c4 early is that black doesn't have the option of g6. He has to react to the pawn in the center, and this is quite a serious threat actually. If black plays g6, he can just take the pawn in this kind of position. But anyways, that's a little bit of a digression. I mean, g3, and we kind of get black set up, which is very, very solid indeed. And we kind of get this set up with an early knight bd2, and white's idea is that if he wants to play c4, black has this option of really just taking the pawn, and it's kind of hard to collect after b5. Even if white somehow gets pretty strong pressure on the queen side after b5, I think it's really, really interesting, this kind of position. So after he didn't play c4 in this kind of position, and trying to get a, let's say, I think it's a symmetrical Grunfeld after like c4, c takes d5. If black, say, plays castles. And so it kind of makes sense what white plays here with knight bd2. His idea is that I want to play c4, I want to play d3, I want to play my bishop here and get a closed Catalan kind of position with you already committed to the g7 square. And this is pretty interesting, really. Black continued with castling, pretty logical, and after c4, as white was obviously going to play, with the knight supporting that, black decided to play bishop e6, and this is it's not a bad move at all, but more natural is bishop f5, and after bishop f5 in this kind of position, I guess at some point white can probably play knight h4 and try to gain the two bishop advantage in this kind of position. Nothing so significant just yet, but definitely one understanding one reason why black would play bishop e6 in the first place. And in this position, white supported his pawn here with his own pawn protecting that, and his idea was to get that bishop out. Remember that. And after knight e4, black decided, after knight takes e4, pawn takes e4, he was going to get significant pressure on the d4 pawn, and so his idea was that this is a well-supported knight, and white can't take it, so he just continued developing in this position. And in this position, black just captured the knight off, and I think this is quite an okay move. But the problem is, I think white is getting a pretty. I'm not really sure where Aronian went wrong in this game. Every move, I don't know. MVL, it looked like MVL played just a fantastic game here. I mean, you can try to see it for yourselves, but as we see in the game, MVL just gets a strong position. MVL in this position played queen takes d2, allowing d takes c4. If you don't want to sacrifice a pawn here in this position after knight takes d2, you can also play knight takes d2 yourself, and this pawn is sufficiently defended at the moment. But black always has this idea of c5, trying to break open the position, and this isn't really what white wanted. So, and besides, there's probably something even better than c5 actually. Maybe I think queen b6 is an idea, attacking the d4 pawn, and e3. Let's see. I think pawn takes here is a pretty serious threat when you can't really recapture with the queen on the bishop. I think the game continuation is just much stronger, and I mean MVL is just impressive in this game. He just takes the queen, and he just sacrifices this pawn, but with this pawn that he's giving up over here, possibly he's getting quite a bit of compensation with the following continuation. First, he starts out with knight g5, gaining a tempo on the bishop, and black doesn't really want to move the bishop to this square because white will, let's say, recapture after pawn takes pawn here, and he's established a good center here with amazing bishops here, and probably this knight is going to come back. But even so, I think the coordination in White's position is very, very nice. That kind of explains after he doesn't really want to move the bishop, and he doesn't want to play a move like Queen D7, allowing the capture of the two bishops in this position when White would have a lot of compensation in this kind of position. I suppose with maybe even Rook FC1 and E4. White's already kind of almost fully developed, and Black is having a difficult time developing his pieces. I think White's doing very well in this position. Not something that Aronian wanted any part of. He didn't really want to play that position. And instead of that, he just chose to keep onto the pawn in probably a more, let's say, open position where he's not doing so badly in space. But the problem with the game continuation is that I don't think it's a very good position to play, really. He took the pawn here and planning just to take another pawn and try to keep as much material as he can for the position that's going to come on the board. White now took the bishop here. I mean, there's not really another move than taking the pawn here. I mean, bishop d5 runs into e4, and move like h6. You can already think of as let's say knight h3 being played, and the bishop now has to move back, and knight f4 getting another tempo, and I mean, you kind of get a similar structure of Black has to go back. Then obviously this is great for White, and well, Queen d7 is kind of similar as to what I showed before. So in essence, it's all the same. If Black plays bishop d5, and in this position, Black just captured, White took, pawn takes knight, and now White played the strong move Queen e3, applying pressure here. And there's not really a good way of defending this, as a move such as Queen d6 is probably just met by bishop h3, and White gets this pawn with pretty decent pressure. He can also just think about capturing the pawn here, opening up the a file, and kind of leaving this option on the board still. And he can always protect this pawn with rook d1 properly, and White's doing quite well in this position. Queen e3 was played, and Black was like, okay, I'm just going to take it all. I've got to take it all. And we kind of reach this let's say forcing sequence with Queen takes e6, coming with check. This is kind of what Black's idea was, to play King h8, kind of get a safe king here. White would have to take here the pawn, and this is actually the game continuation, by the way, where I think White has got quite significant pressure on the queen side here, on the b file especially. Let's say if a rook comes over here, and as we see in the game, let's see after Queen takes a2, Black has an annoying time trying to develop. One idea, since he has these two connected passers over here, is just to push the a pawn. Makes a lot of sense, right? But in this position, I think White can first solidify his position with e3, and followed with moves such as bishop c3 and rook b1. White's got a very, very good position. For example, let's say Black just continues developing with knight d7. I think a move such as rook fb1 is already really annoying, as knight f6 trying to get on the d5 square, probably runs into bishop c3 when this pawn is under pressure. White is kind of preparing queen to this spot, or queen to b3, applying pressure along this diagonal with this bishop, and Black's structure is weak, and it's kind of difficult to play his position. You can look at that in more depth, but that's just kind of the logic that Aronian was going through. That's why he didn't really want to commit to a5 so soon. Instead, after queen a2, he just played rook f5 in this position, trying to laterally. I love the word lateral. It's been happening a lot in this tournament, where a lot of queens and rooks defending laterally in Carlsen's game with rook a6. But rook f5, possibly playing rook b5, and kind of controlling the center in a way. The only problem with this move is that it doesn't really stop White's plan of rook b1 and rook b7. And to remain consistent with his plan, I thought that Aronian would have played rook b5 and try to oppose something on the b file here. But or even a move such as knight a6, trying to protect the queen side with with the knight in front of it. And after a move such as g4, gaining tempo on this rook, I really don't see this working out too well for black, as the rook has to move here, right? And now white just opens up the position for his bishop right here and kind of forces the trade-off of this bishop. Bishop takes b2, rook takes b2, and after, let's say, a tempo gaining move on the queen, queen c4, black is kind of forced to defend the knight because it's attacked, and you kind of get this position where it's just really, really uncomfortable to play as black when white controls the center here, and he's got this nice potential idea with f4 at some point, maybe later, and you still get a lot of pressure in the position, and this isn't that nice. Probably other than even g4, which is not even necessary, by the way. I think white can also think about, give me a second, knight a6, and now white can just think about, oh my god, let's see if I can get it right. Well, anyways, let's see if I can get this right. Rook b5. I guess this is the only thing I left down here. Well, anyways, guys, maybe maybe knight a6 was a better option, but white still has a lot of pressure with e4 and g4. White didn't even have to play d5 in that position, by the way, and he could have played e4, maintaining a good center with a good position, really. But instead of let's say knight a6, black just decided to move up the queen here, and his idea was that his idea is probably queen takes f2 if white plays d5, and maybe even white can play d5 in this kind of position. Interestingly enough, instead of d5, he just played e4 and kind of bolstered this center. And what Lagrave's move surprised me a bit. Going back for a second, by the way, white could play d5 in this position, and after let's say queen takes f2, grabbing a pawn here and forcing the white king in the corner, black's position is about to collapse here on the side over here, and it's really difficult to recommend anything, as this bishop's going to be exchanged, and queen b2 followed by queen b7 is a threat here. So probably black has to play b5, and after, say, takes, king takes, check, rook f6, kind of defending the pawn here. I mean, white can probably just grab here and probably be in really, really good shape here, as this pawn's dropping, this pawn is under pressure, and black has a troubled time figuring out where he wants to develop here. So maybe knight takes here, but already this is kind of dropping a piece due to this pin on that diagonal, and black really didn't want that, I guess. And it just didn't work out. I mean, white could have played d5 definitely and had a good game. Probably black doesn't really need to play queen takes f2, and his alternative is, but they aren't so fantastic for him. So queen b6, d5 was not played, but instead e4, kind of forcing this rook away and trying to maintain a good center, was instead played. Black decided to drop the rook back. I really didn't understand this move, but I guess after further point, maybe after a move such as rook b5, maybe black was nervous about the queen infiltrating this kind of position, or perhaps with a move such as bishop c3 here. Also, a move such as bishop f1 here, attacking the rook here, gaining a tempo, is also pretty annoying for black to play, and he has to move the rook probably to some spot like here, and I don't know. I mean, it just looks extremely uncomfortable after bishop a3, forcing, let's say, a trade of the rooks, and now this queen has to move, and probably white can just shut off the bishop here on g7, and this position just looks terrible for black, given queen f7 is coming, threatening the e-pawn, and this bishop can come to this diagonal, and white still has all the pressure in the position, even though he's down. I think he's down only a pawn in this position. He has extremely good activity and pressure for it. If my voice sounds off, by the way, it's probably because I've got a little bit of allergies here and there. So instead of rook b5 after e4, black decided to play rook f8 instead, dropping the rook back and kind of defending against queen f7 in this kind of position, lending some support to the back row. Only issue with this move is that after bishop c3, this queen has to move again, and black ended up having to play queen c7, and after queen b2, threatening queen b7, black was forced to play b6. There's not really another good move in this kind of position, and white just blasted through the position. And I think Aronian is just doing awfully here, and he doesn't really have a good move to meet this bishop takes g7 move, and you don't want to really push the e pawn here in this kind of position. And I think after just takes, or takes either pawn, or take the bishop, is pretty good for white. I guess after moves such as e6, white can even play this intermediate move with d6 here. Probably there's a tactic here with takes, 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 and white ends up with these kind of a cool line there. Anyways, after d5, black's position's about to collapse here, so I mean, he didn't really see anything better than just taking the bishop. I can't really recommend anything for black. It just looks atrocious here. I mean, if you play c5, then I'm playing e5, and then I have these two amazing pawns here in the center that are going to just steamroll down the board here. I'll create another passer, and I still have all the pressure here on the b file, but I can always switch my rooks over here to support the central pass pawn that will be created. And I mean, white always has this idea of bishop h3 and kind of controlling these light squares over here if something doesn't work out. But I mean, if c5, of course, the bishop is hanging here. I'm just talking about ideas that somehow later somehow this doesn't work out, and the pressure here doesn't work out. You still have the two pawns here that you'll be able to work with these. That'll be let me try to get the words out. That'll be able to you'll be able to work with your really nice pieces. Anyways, after this d5 move, he just played bishop takes c3, and I mean, white just recaptured, and since the black king was in check, he has to slide his king over here, and white just continued with this very dominating play with e5, taking a little bit more space, and black is almost running out of moves, and he's kind of threatening this pawn because this bishop's now on this diagonal, and black played a5, and white just took the pawn. It's really hard to recommend anything. If you play c5, I suppose that let's say d6 happens, and you're uncovering this attack on the rook and attacking the queen, so white wins obviously there. And I don't really have a recommendation at this point. Black is, I mean, it's only a few more moves till we see the end, kind of. Black played a5, I guess, trying to get his knight out, and well, white just took the pawn, and black finally developed this knight in the rook, but it's kind of almost too late, and white just picked up the b pawn here since this is a check. And after king h8, queen takes b6, this pass pawn is just ready to promote. And if you play a move like queen takes c5, I mean, I think just rook takes a5, forking the queen in the knight, and I mean, this position is just a big disaster for black. And queen takes b6 was played, and Aronian just took here, and well, white, just because the queens are off the board doesn't mean that white's activity goes down. His activity further, I guess, increases with the strong pass pawn, and you can see this rook coming to this square in b7, along with the other rook coming to d7, trying to coordinate along the 7th rank here against the black king and black pieces, trying to push the pawn through. Black logically defended and tried to blockade this pawn from further advancing and trying to open up this bishop. But after rook b7, this is already really difficult, and black has to defend the knight and doesn't really want to move it. And then white played the really strong move rook a4, kind of bringing his rook over here, trying to block the pawn also. And it's kind of a waiting move in a sense, but it's just kind of a strong waiting move, let's say. And black is hard pressed to find a move here, as rook b8 will probably just run to rook takes, and rook takes pawn here, and that's not good for black. And in this position, he played rook a6, kind of attacking the pawn, probably just, he's just kind of waiting in this position. He's not, he's not really sure what he wants to do. So I guess, in this position, white, has a lot of time to kind of toy around with black. So he decided to play the slow move h4, further, let's say, kind of a further preparation move. So maybe later on he wants to push the h pawn to, and try to make a dent in black's structure. It's just kind of a waiting move, and white just slowly takes the time to try to kill black in this kind of position. And after king g8, black doesn't really have a good waiting move. He doesn't really have a way to improve his position as his pawn's here, and the rook is going to take the pawn if the knight moves away. And this is just, again, I emphasize, this is just a bad position for black. And we slowly saw that white eventually, left the pawn and allowed the pawn to advance. But after rook d7, coordinating on the 7th rank, like I mentioned earlier, a3, it's kind of a desperation attempt. Rook b takes c7, takes, or actually check first. Sorry about that. I'm sorry about that, guys. Bishop check here first. Planning to mate a2 with just the bishop recapture. King g7. King g7 is probably also right, but black played king f8. They're probably in time trouble given, or towards the end of the game, and I guess Lagrave was just kind of mad at himself for the entire game, and king g7 probably just takes the e7 pawn is good enough to he played king f8 though, and just allowed this ending right here, where a2 check, king g7 check, and very important move. And after king h6, white sacrificed the pawn for the rook, bishop for the pawn. Excuse me. Rook takes bishop, and now the pawn is just promoting on the c8 square, and black has to give up the rook for that to not get immediately mated, but of course this is completely lost. Anyways, I'm not really sure where Aronian went wrong. This just looks like an overall just an impressive game by MVL. I played this opening I used to play this opening 2 for white, and in this kind of position, sorry, my board is glitching so hard, guys. In this kind of position, I'm not exactly sure where black went wrong. He took the pawn, but maybe his mistake is knight e4. I'm not really aware where he went wrong. It's very difficult to say. If you have any suggestions, I'd love to know where Aronian went wrong in this position. It looks like just like a model game from a Catalan or Ready opening from the white side, where white got very substantial compensation for a pawn with the pressure along the b file, and the really nice central pawns that we saw come into the later part of the game after this kind of pawn sacrifice. I think it was just overall very an excellently played game by MVL. Anyways, guys, this is I guess I'm gonna cover what's his name, Nakamura playing Topalov in the other game. I'll post that tomorrow morning if you're interested. Right now I'm pretty sleepy, and I've been messing up my lines here and there, and I need to get some sleep. Thanks for watching the video, guys. You guys are awesome. Thanks for all the support you've given me. This is Infinite Flash signing out.